Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to our community. Here at M&A Science, our goal is to deliver knowledge that we learn from the community and we return back to the community. By visiting M&A Science, you'll find all the information you need to help upskill your M&A career. So to get started, all you have to do is sign up for our free weekly newsletter to stay current on the latest courses, upcoming events, and expert interviews. Again, that's M&A Science. Hi, everybody. This is John Murata, Chief Operating Officer here at M&A Science. And today I am so excited to introduce to you Staci van Schagen. Staci, how are you?
I'm very good. Thank you.
Lovely. So just for those who aren't familiar with Staci, she actually heads up and is the head of M&A integration and disentanglement at Philips. Philips is a multinational corporation, and they are traded on the New York Stock Exchange as PHG. So with that, Staci, today for our audience, we're going to go over the topic around flexibility, notably how to bake flexibility into integration. And as I guess you can also agree to, which is in this current market, flexibility is probably the modus operandi of many cultural changes within integration. So before we get into the topic though, Staci, why don't we learn more about you? So if you wouldn't mind, can you tell us more about how you got started in integration and in M&A?
Sure, thanks. And I'm really excited to be here as well, John. So thanks for having me. So just stepping back a little in who I am and where I come from, I think I'll try to keep it as short as possible, but my background kind of molded me and brought me to where I am today. So let's go backwards a little bit. So I've been in the position I have now for about 5 years. So I guess you could say officially M&A integration and disentanglement just for 5 years, but of course that's not the case. I've been doing integration and separation for many years, only, it wasn't really a discipline at the time. So I've been piecing that together a bit and across my career. So I lead a team of program managers, and we focus on integration and separation activities at Philips globally. And as you said, Philips is a health technology company, and we've been on our acquisition and divestment journey since about 2014. We got very serious when we took the strategic decision to become a pure health tech player. So I started at Philips in 2014, and it was welcome to Philips, and you're going to help disentangle the lighting business from Philips. So right when I started, it was the biggest disentanglement or separation that Philips had done. And it was really our huge step to, health tech. So there I was part of the IT work stream. So I led the IT procurement work stream because I was the IT business partner of procurement. And I learned so much on that journey just because procurement touches so many parts of the organization. So that really gave me a broad perspective of the operation of Philips. So that was how I came into Philips. I was an IT business partner for many enabling functions, and where we, kind of do the business transformation roadmap. But then as part of that, I also was an IT transition manager for the global business services, which is kind of like integration in that you're moving these internal processes to, enabling services in low-cost countries for more efficiency. But then again, you're using the same models of integration. So led international integration in a project that spanned 34 countries. I had a project team of over 150 people, and it taught me a lot about the world and also about Philips. So I think that gave me a great basis to lead the team I lead now. We oversee many integration and disentanglement projects, or I oversee them with my team. And some of them make it over the line, some of them don't. I think all of us that are practitioners would recognize that. And if you want to know more about what we did, you can check out our corporate website. And I just want to go back a little bit to what I said before. I've been officially for 5 years in M&A, but of course that's not the case. And prior to Philips, I worked in publishing, both international and domestic, and there also dabbled a bit in integration and disentanglement, but just from a different perspective in publishing. So kind of have that vast background in different industries. So that's a little bit about who I am and where I came from.
Oh my gosh, there's so much to unpack there. I'm writing notes as quickly as possible to keep up with your history and your experience. If I may, I'd actually like to double down on the topic of perspective. your tenure, both national, international, which you covered, is outstanding. Philips itself is a multinational corporation. How would you say that through your experiences, just outside of Philips, within Philips, that this has enhanced your perspective around running global integration projects and programs? I mean, what has it that spurred like this, this culmination, if you will, of just knowledge about how you run a global program around integration?
Yeah, I think it's really important to have a good view of the world, kind of understanding the cultures a little bit better when you're running global integrations. And I think, ever since I was young, I've been very active in intercultural activities, let's say, and interacting with different cultures from around the world. And that was really what bit me and made me want to work internationally, let's say, because I like bringing different cultures together and working with different cultures. I think it really helps because you have an understanding of how the different groups kind of work. And also having a multinational team really helps understand the different cultures. So my team, I think we have, I don't know, we're a team of about 10 and we're probably 5 or 6 different nationalities. And that also
Wow.
helps. Yeah, it really helps in bringing a different approach to the transformations that we do. And I think that plays a key role when you have a global integration because you also need to understand each other. So like I was talking about that large project I worked on, our IMO consisted of, I think, 4 or 5 nationalities working together. And that really helped us have that view on all the other countries that we needed to integrate into this project. And I think it's a lot harder to integrate across geographies because you're also not dealing with one specific country laws and compliancy rules. You really have to look at how does HR work in China. I can tell you it's very different than how it works in the Netherlands or in the US. So it's really good to have that perspective when you're running these types of integration. It's not necessary. You can learn it. I mean, I learned a lot, but having that diverse cultural background and understanding really helped me, especially knowing a lot about international business and where we needed to go. So that helps navigate. And I think also makes it a little bit easier and more flexible if you do understand that.
I love the idea of multinational teams. It's something that myself, over my career doing integrations, I've found to be just one of those hidden gems, if you will, of having an international team. But not only from the perspective of people being in different places, but the difference in culture, the difference in ideas, the difference in ideology, bring that all together really creates just a really nice dynamic that I can learn from as well, right? I mean, as an IMO leader, it's been wonderful to participate in that because one of the things that I think is important as a leader is to learn and continuously improve on myself in every integration that I've ever done. So this is
Totally agree.
such a fabulous point. And if I may, I'm going to go off script a little bit, which is on the culture point. Uh,
Mhm.
the with so many people in different countries and different geographies, how does Stacy keep her team moving forward with a lot of that differentiation that you're trying to absorb and learn from and continue to stabilize and standardize? Is that something that you do in terms of process or as a leader, make sure that the team continues to move forward with some level of stability?
Yeah, tough question, but I think we tend to. I think one of the things is we're a very tight team, so we're very aware of each other's strengths and weaknesses, and we create a lot of psychological safety in our team. So we really
Mm,
feel like we can ask each other anything. And I think the diverse cultures and working in different geographies also helps that you can ask someone in the team, like, "Hey, I'm feeling uncomfortable when I'm in discussions with this, Japanese." Our Japanese colleagues, do you have any tips on how to do that, or things like that? And I think that really helps us and helps me as a leader to encourage them to to step outside their comfort zone and to feel like they can do that. And we're very aware of the different cultures within Philips, just because Philips is such a global company. It's kind of part of your DNA when you're onboarded is to really understand that, hey, we work across the globe and we have to be sensitive to different cultures and ways of working. In healthcare, it's even more important to understand the different regulatory environments that you're facing, because that's, besides all the cultural aspects of how to even talk to people in an integration, you also have the, okay, but what are my rules of the game in that specific geography? So I really help the team in learning, being open and being able to have those conversations when you're in those difficult situations.
Wow, that's so powerful. Just the idea of having the rules of the game kind of predefined.
Mm.
So for our audience today, there are many who actually also work for other multinationals. Would you recommend around this idea of safety? Like, what would you recommend as one of the first steps that they can take to espouse this idea of safety within your IMO? Any thoughts there?
Well, I think one of the things I do when we're onboarding new colleagues is we give everyone a copy of a book called The Culture Map. That's by
Oh,
Erin Meyer.
okay.
Not sure if you're familiar with it, but it kind of helps just set the scene of the differences in how cultures work. And I think once you've taken the time to read that book and you have an idea, especially if you're kind of new to the international way of working, I think that really helps you to kind of get a grasp of how people work. And you'll also have those aha moments when you're in those discussions, like, aha, I remember reading that about that specific culture. So that's one of the things we do. The other thing I try to do is just have a really open and transparent relationship with the team, so that they feel comfortable enough and not intimidated to have those conversations. I try to be as encouraging as possible. I'm also very direct and sometimes say the wrong things, but then I, go back and say, hey, sorry, I was probably a little bit harsh there, but what I meant to say was, so really gives them a feeling of working together. And we do a lot of learnings and deep dives, like you talked about continuous improvement. We do a lot of continuous improvement and learnings as we go along, so that people feel comfortable in sharing how they did something. They get tips, of maybe other ways they can look at it. But we're very respectful of everyone's journey, I think, is getting to the end game in the IMO. And when you're looking at IMO specifically, because we kind of advise the IMOs, we're part of the IMO for a while, and then it's business as usual, where the business
Mm.
integration leader will take over with their project managers, let's say. I try to also give them the tools they need, or we as a team, what they need to be able to work in that, intercultural environment. But a lot of people at Philips already have that, or they're expats, or they've been in international so long that they don't even know what it's like to work in a domestic company, for instance.
Okay. It's such a big world.
Yeah.
It sounds like in terms of the Philips culture, but even within your own team, you building your own culture, I think is amazing. Uh, I'm definitely going to look at the book called The Culture Map by Erin Meyer. So once this podcast goes public, Erin Meyer might see a bunch of blips coming up on his book or her book.
Her
So
book. Yeah.
um, then this is let's actually talk about this idea of the continuous improvement. It's an
Mhm.
important topic, I think, from what you just mentioned, and the way that you want your team to continue to evolve.
Yeah.
Myself, I found that just for my own personal career, continuous improvement has allowed me to sort of rebuild myself over time when I thought maybe I didn't want to do integration anymore, and I just kind of want to, kind of go in house, if you will, and just run a BU or just run a
Mhm.
department. But then things come up, and I'm like, oh, I get revived and recharged about doing integration all over again. And this idea of continuous improvement is one of those principles that comes out of, like, in terms of agile principles. It's just one of those tenets of
Yeah.
agile. So let's shift a little bit and discuss kind of the methods behind what Staci employs, not only at Philips but also over her career. Um, One of the tenets that I also want to talk about is with regard to delivering outcomes. Right? It's
Mhm.
not just about delivering on a date. It's not about delivering on a budget, but it's about delivering outcomes. Would you agree that there's this movement toward delivering outcomes from integration, not just delivering a successful merger of a company?
100%. And we're definitely seeing that. So I want to touch on all these, and I hope I don't forget each one. So remind me if I do. Let me start with continuous improvement. So I also want to call it continuous learning. I
Mhm.
think continuous learning, continuous improvement is really important to be flexible and agile. So what we do as a team is, after we've had let's say a big deliverable like the integration readiness deck, which for us is like this huge deliverable of your plan of what you're going to do in integration. We have a deep dive meeting with the team where the program leaders who are working on that project present what they did, not the deck, but how they got to the deck. So what are the things they did in order to get there? What are the challenges they encountered? Why did they, encounter those challenges? And how can we improve that moving forward? And usually after each of those deep dives, we call them, we come up with ways to change our process a little bit or change our templates or do things a little bit differently from the learnings. So I think that's one way to be agile and to really focus on how to learn from experience and to make sure the team, and this goes back a little bit to, we're constantly, well, not constantly, but every few years you kind of have this turnover of after about 3 or 4 years, we tend to make a move within Philips. So you're going to get new people coming in who need to be trained. By having these continuous learning sessions, you give them the tools they need to be able to develop quicker because they hear what's happening from others. So you also become more agile and a little more flexible in delivering on your strategy of integration or separation.
Mm-hmm.
To go to your other question about delivering on outcomes, I would say there's definitely been a shift from, hey, let's get this project done, A, B, C, D, hey, we're integrated, we move forward, to did we deliver on the value that we said we were going to when we went into this acquisition? So we're seeing a shift from really looking at planning, getting your IT done, getting, just checking all the boxes, to moving into delivering on value creation. And that means being agile in your integration planning. It means, hey, we might not 100% go into our ERP system, but we might do a hybrid approach because we want to create value. So what we're doing now is we've just actually completed what we call annual improvement plans, where we worked on how can we better show value creation, and what do we need to change in our process in order to create that value creation. And what we've done is we've really focused on, there was a huge focus on get things done, spend the money in the 2 years of your PMI budget period, and then, the value will create itself. But we all know value doesn't create itself. The business is super excited about doing this integration, and we need to make sure we're focusing on the right thing. So now we're looking more to capability building towards the value drivers. So we identify earlier in the process, and this came from our continuous learning. We look at the value drivers earlier in our process, and then we assign owners to that from a business perspective. And then we are going to drive the value creation through releasing capabilities within the planning that will enhance those value drivers, and then ensure that we create the value first before we finish all the checks in the checks in the boxes. So that's how we're kind of adapting that and becoming more, I would say, more agile, more flexible, but it's really delivering on your promises a little quicker. Because I think if you talk to other practitioners as well, they'll probably say, we eventually get to the value, but it's not in the 3-5 years that we had initially said. Maybe it's in, more in the outer years. And by focusing more on this value creation earlier, we're hoping to get that value earlier in the process.
Okay. I can't keep up with the speed at which you're getting all this amazing information. So if I may, I'm going to summarize a little bit of what I heard,
Sure.
but certainly feel free to correct me where I'm wrong. So one of the original points that you made around learning about the why, not just the how, right? Why do we do certain things a certain way to get to the integration readiness deck? What were the lessons learned that we applied that we've now absorbed and, of course, instituted into the next version of that, which is the better version to do the next acquisition? So I think that's one of the ones that I did here. The second one, which is, I love the topic of did we deliver on what we expected to? And what I wanted to add on to that was, did we deliver the right thing, right? And to your point of value creation, which is, right, did we deliver value for all the stakeholders involved in this transaction, right? Whether it's a disentanglement or a roll-up or an acquisition, like we have to look at a lot of facets, right? We have our employees, we have our customers, we have our vendors, we have our key stakeholders, we have our customers. all of that is part of delivering the right thing in terms of value creation. Did I get that right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
It's a
And
lot to unpack there because I think we focus a lot on the numbers. So did we create, the value in dollars or euros or whatever currency you're using? And we don't focus a lot on what you said, which is, did we create value with, maybe our contracts or our customers? I think we measure that differently. So we measure NPS scores, for instance,
hmm,
for our customers, things like that. I don't think we're as good at capturing things outside of monetary value yet, but it's definitely a very good point that you make that we should be putting more focus on all of the other value creation that should come out of it. We identify a lot of it, but we focus a lot on the numbers just because, yeah, that's where the financials come from when you're a listed company, right?
I totally understand. Maybe a lesson learned for all of us as well, which is we got to pay attention to the numbers a little bit better overall. uh, so one of the things that I heard you mention was that this integration readiness deck, like, it's a process to get there, right? It's a learning process also to get there. But once you're there, it's great because people are engaging and having conversations and exchanging information.
Mhm.
But I'm going to go a little bit off script here, Stacy, to ask you, which is what happens when you don't know something or you can't forecast past 100 days? Like, what happens then, and how do you address that with the team so that you
Mhm.
continue to move forward in the conversation so that you're kind of baking in some uncertainty into your assumptions as you
Yeah.
build your integration plan?
Yeah. So let me touch on a few things, and I'll try not to go at rapid speed again because I have that problem. Um, so you're absolutely correct in the integration readiness deck is a process. It's a iterative process. It's not something that is just, born. We don't just fill in slides. We're
Mm,
really building it from the ground up. We have a template, of course, and we decide which parts are the most important to present, let's say, for approval, but we make sure we fill in all the parts. And it's not just about the first 100 days. It's really about our approach for making this a success within Philips. So it goes much further than that. And it goes into a lot of details, including what is your legal entity roadmap, right? So it
mm,
goes really into the nitty gritty. But it is a process, and you can't know everything at the start, of a integration. So what do? We first of all, it is iterative. It's very agile, and that we're changing and editing and recreating as we go through. Because what we do is we check with the business leaders, we check with the owners of these value creation targets. We check with our markets that they're going to be able to do what the business thinks they're going to be able to do to sell. So we have a lot of those checks, and along the way, we find out if it's actually possible to do this or not, and then we will tweak it, or we'll bring up red flags saying, "Hey, this is going to be challenging. What do we need to do to prevent those red flags in the future?" So it's very much um, fluid in building it. And then once we have it, it's a stick in the mud. It's not to say this is what you have to do. So you have to continuously change that as we move forward in the integration. That's that's one part of it. But also the team should not be afraid to make mistakes, right? We can't know what we don't know. We don't know everything. So we need to make sure that we leave room for that adaptation as you move through the deliverables. So that's kind of how I see that.
Okay. Huge point about adaptability. That's given our current economic situation around the world, right? We certainly see companies adapting very quickly to lots of different things, from ESG to supply chain challenges. There's a
Yeah.
lot going on there. Uh, I like the point about checks and balances. I will be honest, I've probably not been the best at myself, like in my own career, putting in checks and balances with my own leadership team. I tend to have a plan, and then I tend to stick to it a little bit more so than I probably should, and I just kind of drive forward. But I think I'm going to put that into my next set of integration plans as well, which is checks and balances for sure. Now, the this idea of course not knowing everything and allowing for the flexibility of where errors can occur do you find that you have kind of this innate nature of understanding, like if something's gone too far and you kind of got to kibosh it so that we get back on track? Or do you like the workstream leader sort of have a little bit free reign, more free reign? I think this is probably a question more for my veteran audience, which is like, how far does Stacy let the team go before she says, okay, time out, we got to stop, we're going a little bit too far here, we're going in the wrong direction?
So let me go a little bit to our process. So in building the deck, I think there's a timeline to that because you have a certain amount of time that you need to deliver. So it has to be before we go to sign, and that has the agreements you have with the target. So there you have a defined end time, so you know how long you have, and you have a lot of long nights right before that, but it's a deliverable. Once we've done that and we've actually acquired the company, then we of course have the first 100 days where we do the kickoff planning and things like that, and we check our check our thinking with the target. So we say, hey, is this right? Like, did we get our thought process right here? We haven't always done that in the past, but something we've improved upon as a learning. And then we have what we call replanning workshops, and we do that pretty much every quarter. So the furthest out a mistake, let's say, can go is a quarter, because then we look back and we say, hey, is everything on track, or do we need to recalibrate? So we're constantly recalibrating and rebaselining and making decisions based on what we now know. Because as you know, you never know everything. You're making tons of assumptions when you're taking over a company, even when you're doing separation, tons of assumptions until you actually meet with the buyer or the seller and you say, this is what we've thought of. And then you realize, okay, maybe 10%'s right, 50%'s right, 80%'s right. Yeah. And then you have to shift all that as you move forward. So that's kind of how we adapt for that ever-changing gaining of knowledge, I guess you could call it.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of re-education as well, right? It's like relearning, hey, what I learned 6 months ago may not be true. Or actually, in some cases, I'll be honest, when I go through some of the due diligence docs, it's like, hey, did you make this right assumption? And what, yeah, I guess the market was different 6 months ago than it is today, but it's like, okay, we might have to refactor this and apply a different algorithm.
Yeah, we also do retrospective. So after a year, we do a
Oh,
retrospective of how we did, and we also do a retrospective sometimes after 3 years. And it's very interesting to go back to the diligence documents because I just did one recently, and I was like, "Whoa, what were we thinking?" So yeah, that happens all the time because, like I said, you don't know what you don't know. And I think I want to go back to something else you said earlier about the psychological safety and the team. I think the big thing is you got to not be afraid to make a mistake. So no one has all the answers. So you have to just be able to work on these assumptions. And a lot of us in this field are perfectionists because we're here because we're good at detail and we're good at getting things done. But I think there's a way to be a perfectionist in a way of getting the steps right and learning to apply the fluidity and the adaptation of what you're learning and feeling like you're doing it right because you're applying all these learnings that you have and making it better than having the perfect answer at the beginning. And that's kind of why, or how I also try to, encourage the team of, yeah, you can't be right most of the time in this job. You're going to be wrong. So learn to appreciate the process, so that also gives you a little bit of confidence in being able to make those tough decisions that have to be made. We're going to go with plan A. We have plan B, C, and D all worked out in case, but let's do it and see what happens and then adapt.
oh my gosh, those are such great words of wisdom. Thank you so much. I could stop here right now and be like, call it a day. We're good. You made me laugh because of this your the view of perfectionism. So
Mhm.
a little bit personal here, but when my wife and I were dating, she was in the medical field, and she would tell me every once in a while, it's like, I think you have a dose of clinical perfectionism. Like, is there such a thing? And I looked it up, and there is. So, not going too far into the medical definition of it, but
Mhm.
I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I have a little bit. So, and she still married me. So, like, okay, like who's wrong here?
Well, this job actually taught me how to be a different perfectionist. And that's really
Oh,
helped
okay.
me grow as well. So yeah, I know exactly where you're coming from. I just didn't know it had a label.
Yes, neither did I. Well, one of the ways that we learn to be better, of course, is in the reflections. And I caught that note from you. Tell me, when did you start using this method of reflections, either with your team or with yourself? Because I remember using the word postmortem, which was dreadful, but I
Mhm.
love reflections. So when did you start looking at it as a way to run integration?
I think, well, we just started probably a couple of years ago with running, adding to our processes 1 year review. So after we've been integrating for a year, let's look back, see where we are, so that we can improve on the next acquisition that we do. That's probably been in the last 2 years that we've done that, because it's something I thought would help us learn more, and also because we had a lot of new people joining, it really helped the
Hmm.
learning process. So that's kind of, I think, where it was born, let's say. And also because we got a lot of questions about, hey, why did this happen, why did that happen, and we actually didn't have a lot of the answers. We had a lot of ideas of what the answers were, but we didn't validate those answers. So this helps us validate those answers with the business leader. So I think that's where that 1 year reflection came in. When we
Okay.
do longer reflections, it's usually at the request of a business leader, or sometimes because of, we're looking at the value creation of what we've done. So the business leader would like to know, hey, we're not doing what we said we were going to do. Can we look back and see where that happened, and why that happened? So that's when it's kind of more of an ad hoc thing to do, but I actually like doing it because you learn a lot about your diligence process at that point. Because 3 years is a nice time to look back and see, ooh, did I have that right? 1 year is a little bit short. Somewhere between 2 and 3 years is probably a good time to do that bigger retrospective, to look at your diligence process and really improve that. The other thing I wanted to mention, because you said postmortem, you triggered something. One thing we did with one of the projects, that large integration project I worked on, was a pre-mortem. And there
Oh.
we looked at, during the sign to close period, because we sat in a huge antitrust, they had to look at everything. So we had a bunch of time. We sat with the team, not with the target, but with the business team. And we sat down for 3 days and we went through a pre-mortem exercise. We said, what if this went wrong? What if that
Mm.
went wrong? Um, and we applied a lot of that as things went wrong. So it was really nice to have that pre-mortem at the start of a project, especially one of that size, because it was big. And it was very interesting to go back and look at that pre-mortem when I was writing the 3 year retrospective, as I won't call it a postmortem, because I could use a lot of that information that was discussed during that pre-mortem. So I thought that was a great idea to do. That was the idea of one of the business leaders at the time. And I thought it was really, really powerful.
Oh my gosh, that's really cool. I don't think I've ever done a premortem. Um, Maybe I'm a bit of what's the word I'm looking for? Uh, I don't like maybe creating a self-fulfilling prophecy of failure, but tell me if I'm wrong here, which is it's not designed to be about failure. It's designed to be about how you succeed by avoiding the potential paths that could cause failure. Is that about right?
Yeah, totally. And I think it goes back to something I wanted to touch on, which is kind of the scenario planning, right? So knowing what to do if A happens, what can B, C, and D be? So I think just gives you some leverage. It's not a license to fail, because I think that would be too easy. It's more, these are the things that can come into, yeah, because you could see it as an excuse, right? You say, hey, I told you
Yeah.
this was going to happen, but that's not how we used it. We used it really to predict, or to have some ideas of what we think could happen from the vast experience that this business team had. Because I was just there, as a program manager, and my experience of, I've seen programs fail and what is it, but these are coming from business leaders who know our customers, who know the product very well, and had some really great insights. And we really dissected it and it was very interesting to know also what we needed to prevent that. So um, I really liked it. You could also argue, are we a little bit too organized, right? Are we looking at things too much before we're starting? Should we just go with the flow and see what happens? Which you could argue also could work very well in an integration. But I think, to be honest, planning and being prepared to fail, and reassessing and moving forward with a new plan, is a much better way to do it than to not be prepared, because not being prepared for an integration is just, there's so many things that are going to come up that for me, preparation is everything.
I agree. I agree. I'd like to ask just one caveat, or not caveat, but qualifying question to
Hmm.
that, which is um, preparation. I'm all about preparing, but there are different levels of preparing, right? You're
Hmm.
preparing for a $5 billion acquisition versus a $5 million acquihire.
Yeah.
Do you find that your tendency around preparation tends to shift a little bit in terms of how much you enforce with your team as you look at
Yeah.
one size versus the other?
Yes, definitely. We'll look at, how prepared do you need to be for, a specific acquisition. Also, how prepared do you need to be for a specific separation? So we definitely will tailor according to the impact. So it's not always price that's an impact. It can also be how much impact does it have to your customer base, or how much impact does it have to your business? And then we'll tailor the preparation to that. So we want to make sure we're hitting all the important items. So um, in healthcare, it's very important to have your, clinical quality and regulatory, buttoned
Mm,
down and know what's happening. So that's one that we'll spend a lot of time on in preparation to make sure we're ready. Because you also need to be ready to sell, right? If you're doing a pre FDA approved acquisition of something and they're going into FDA approval, you need to make sure you have that all prepared and you're running a very tight ship with something like that. Whereas if it's something a little, less intense, you can go a little lighter on the preparation.
yeah. I'll circle back to one of your earlier points around this idea of uncertainty, right? And your ability to work with your business unit heads or other teammates to check and recheck that
Hmm.
your logic is actually in fact correct. One of the things I just wrote down here, which is your ability to ask these questions genuinely and in a timely manner, actually is a risk mitigation tactic, if I may say so, because it lets you recalibrate and re-baseline where you might have to adjust the plan, right? Because the plan you wrote 6 months ago for integration has some baked in uncertainty into it. But as we all know, for those of us who've been around a while, sometimes you get sidetracked with something else that just wasn't factored in. So
COVID, for
a lot
instance.
of it, a lot of time. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Um,
totally.
so, if I may, you and I, we have lots of folks that we've interacted with over our careers in integration. This topic of scenario planning, I'd like to just ask one last question on it,
Hmm.
because even for those of us who've been around a while, and then maybe even a lesson learned for the new folks that are entering into sort of career in integration, scenario planning is a skill that is super important to learn very early. I mean, maybe at some point, MBA programs should have taught this as well, which is how to be better at it and look at the possible failures and the success factors and pathways. Is there a recommendation from you of how you would recommend, let's say, a new person in their integration career upskill themselves to be better at scenario planning or learn how to do it? Because I think this is a great lesson for
Hmm.
our listeners.
I think I think the how you can just learn from experience, but I think the why is really important. So why do you need to have different scenarios? And I think if you understand that, that can help. I actually read this book that was recommended by one of our chief finance leaders, called Synchronicity, by Joseph Jaworski. And he was a scenario planner at Shell, I believe, if I got it right. Also did a lot of other stuff, but one of the things he did was scenario planning. And in his book, it's a leadership book, so it's about something totally different. But they talk a little bit about scenario planning and why it was important. I think that was the one part of the book that really helped me to understand why scenario planning is so important. I think it shifted my perspective of why we need to do it. And I think when you understand the why, it'll help you in the how to plan, because you have an understanding of, you know, what are the inputs that are going to lead to the different outputs. And then doing that is just kind of, yeah, part of thinking critically about how to approach something. So that's kind of how I see it, if
My
that makes
gosh.
sense.
That's great. Okay, audience, Synchronicity by Joseph Jaworski. Another piece of homework for all of you to take on a road trip. Uh, I'm an adjunct professor, so I love giving out homework. All right. Stacy, so much information here. I'm unfortunately going to have to wrap it up here because I'm kind of like I'm writing as quickly as possible, but also running out of time a little bit here. If I
Did
may,
you get
can we
all the
do
answers you were looking for, by the way? Because I think we went off topic a bit, but it
a
was a great
bit?
conversation.
But it's so there's just such a wealth of information. You've been so wonderful. But I do want to do I want to respect your time because I know you're headed out here. But I do a quick speed round if I may.
Sure.
Just a
Yep.
quick set of questions that the audience kind of gets to know Stacy van Schagen a little bit better. Sorry, Stacy van Schagen Tobak a little bit better. Um, okay, first speed round question, which is
Mhm.
what is the craziest thing you've seen in M&A?
Yeah. So I have two answers to this question.
All right.
One is, I think it's not really crazy, but it's surprising, is that the assumption just of integration just kind of happens. I think there's this like idea that integration just happens without a lot of the planning. So that's a little bit surprising. But I think the craziest thing I've ever seen in M&A, and this is something we encountered, we were doing a um, acquisition, and we realized we did an asset deal, and we realized that we had a contract with rental cars, and that there were people that had these rental cars, and the day that we closed, they would no longer be insured because there'd be this liability. So we had to like figure out, working like through the night, how we're going to exchange these rental cars. So that's kind of like a crazy thing you find out during an integration. So I thought it was very interesting. We did it. We got it all organized without any liabilities, but it was something you just didn't expect.
Oh my gosh. That's a nuance that you don't really expect. I agree.
Those are the details and the details and the details.
Oh my goodness. I'm glad you mentioned that because I think it's really important that for those clinical perfectionists like in us, details are really important.
Very.
Next speed question is
Mhm.
what is your M&A superpower?
I think the breadth of knowledge that I have from my experience, from the multiple functions and industries, I really think that helps to, first of all, it gives a lot of confidence in when I give answers, and it helps to become a trusted advisor to the business leader acquiring. So I think that's what I would call my superpower. Power.
I love it. Being a trusted advisor to the company that you're acquiring. I love it. And actually, kind of similar to that point, so last speed question, which
Mhm.
is based on your international experience and having worked with many leaders across the world, what skills would you recommend for maybe the younger integration folks who are looking to upskill themselves into an international role? How would you look at somebody who you bring onto your team?
Yeah. So I think sensitivity to cultures and a good emotional IQ is really important. Also look for structured problem solvers. So you can be a problem solver like an innovator, but not be very structured in that. And I think that's very important. Um, Also trusting your instincts. So knowing that, you can trust yourself to make a decision. And what's really important is willingness to learn and accept that you won't know everything. I think those are really key concepts, especially when you're working internationally and everything's going to be different than you expected.
Oh my gosh. Stacy, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
It's been an
you.
amazing time with you. Everyone, please, a round of applause for Stacy van Schagen Tobak. It's been a wonderful amount of information we've collected from you and the contribution to the community. We really appreciate everything that you've done for us today. So from M&A Science, everyone, we're going to be wrapping up with Stacy van Schagen Tobak. Thank you very much. Have a great day.